If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Your support helps us share more meaningful stories. Lucas never imagined that the night would begin the way it did. There was nothing special about it at first. No warning signs. No sense that something meaningful was approaching. Just rain, soft in the beginning, almost polite, tapping gently against the windows before settling into something heavier. The kind of rain Seattle was known for. The kind that didn't announce itself loudly, didn't rush in, didn't demand attention. It simply arrived and stayed. Lucas sat alone in his apartment. His shoes were kicked off near the door. His jacket hung over the back of a chair he rarely used. The overhead lights were off, and only a single lamp glowed in the corner, casting long shadows across the floor. His phone lay face down on the coffee table, deliberately placed there, as if turning it over might invite interruptions he wasn't ready for. The rain filled the silence. He had grown used to silence. Not the peaceful kind people romanticize, but the kind that settles in when you stop expecting someone to call. When evenings stretch long and unclaimed. When conversations exist mostly in your head, and the world feels distant, even when it isn't. That was when his phone vibrated. The sound was soft but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. Lucas didn't reach for it right away. He watched the faint glow reflect off the surface of the table. He listened to the rain. He let the moment stretch, as if delaying the answer might protect him from whatever waited on the other side. Then he saw the name. Claire. He hadn't seen that name on his screen in years. Not since the holidays stopped including long conversations. Not since messages became shorter, then rarer, and then disappeared entirely. Not since time folded distance and unresolved feelings into something easier to ignore than confront. His thumb hovered over the screen. One part of him wanted to let it ring, to allow the moment to pass, to return to the safety of quiet. But another part of him, the part he pretended didn't exist, recognized the weight behind that name. He answered. Lucas. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. It's been a long time, Claire said. Her voice was warm, familiar, and thinner somehow, as if it had been stretched by something heavy and invisible. Before he could respond, another voice joined the call. Aunt Margaret. Her tone was calm, measured. The kind of voice that always sounded like it had already thought everything through before speaking. We were hoping you could do something for us. Lucas sat up straighter. What kind of something? There was a careful pause. Not a favor, Claire said quickly. And not an obligation, Margaret added. We'd like you to come spend a week with us. The word week sounded unreal. A week. Tomorrow, Margaret replied without hesitation. If you can. The call ended just as suddenly as it had begun. No explanations. No reasons. No context. Only a silence that felt heavier than before. Lucas stared at the dark screen long after the glow disappeared. He barely knew them anymore. Two sisters who lived separate lives. One in Oregon, the other in Canada. Women who existed now mostly as names on holiday cards and polite smiles across crowded tables years ago. So why did this feel different? Why did his chest feel tight? As if he had just agreed to something far larger than a visit. By morning he had packed a bag. The drive felt longer than it should have. Rain faded into pale sunlight, then returned without warning. The road stretched endlessly ahead, trees blurring together as mile after mile slipped beneath his tires. He told himself this was normal. Just family reconnecting. Just a visit. But every mile carried a quiet sense of inevitability, as if he wasn't traveling toward a place, but toward a moment that had already decided to meet him. The lake house appeared in the afternoon, tucked between tall pines. Its windows glowed warmly against the gray sky, light spilling outward like an invitation that had been waiting longer than he realized. Claire stood at the door. She hugged him the moment he stepped out of the car. Not briefly, not politely, but tightly, as if she were afraid that if she let go too soon, he might disappear again. You're really here, she whispered. Margaret placed a gentle hand on his arm. You must be tired. Inside, the house smelled of fresh bread and lavender. A fire crackled in the living room, and the silence here felt different. Intentional. Full. They didn't ask about his job. They didn't ask about the weather. They asked about his thoughts, his regrets, the loneliness he never admitted out loud. And slowly, carefully, they began to share their own. How time slipped away. How quiet houses felt louder than busy ones. How the world grew colder when people stopped truly seeing you. Lucas felt something shift in the room. This wasn't a visit. It was an opening. Dinner was simple. Soup. Warm bread. Tea that steamed between their hands. Conversation moved slowly, gently, like people walking across thin ice. At times, the room filled with comfortable silence. At other moments, it held words that felt heavier than they sounded. Later that night, Lucas lay awake in the guest room. The window was slightly open. The lake was quiet. The air smelled like pine and rain. He realized how long it had been since he felt this kind of stillness. Not the empty silence of his apartment, but the kind that listens back. The next morning, Margaret placed an envelope on the table beside his coffee. "This is for you," she said. Lucas frowned. The paper was thick. The handwriting unfamiliar. Inside was a letter. It was from his mother. The date was 23 years ago. His hands began to shake. He had never seen this. Not once. The letter spoke of fear, of love, of choices made in quiet moments, of a secret she never found the courage to tell him. Lucas felt the room tilt. The story he believed about his family, about himself, began to fracture. And for the first time, he understood why this visit was never meant to be simple. Lucas sat at the table for a long time, the letter still open in his hands. The words did not blur. They burned. His mother's handwriting was careful, almost gentle, as if she had been afraid of hurting the paper. "If you are reading this, it means I was not brave enough to tell you myself." The room felt suddenly smaller. Claire and Margaret watched him, silent. The fire cracked softly. Outside, the lake remained still, as if it had chosen not to move. The letter spoke of a love that arrived too early. Of a man who wanted to stay but could not. Of a child who was never a mistake, but who was born into a world that wasn't ready. It spoke of fear. Of shame. Of a promise she made to herself to protect him, even if it meant carrying the truth alone. Lucas's breath became shallow. "You mean?" His voice broke. "My father." Margaret nodded once. "He wasn't the man who raised you." The words landed without sound, but their impact was immense. The ground of his life shifted. Every memory rearranged itself. The man he called father, distant, rigid, silent, suddenly made sense in a way that hurt more than confusion ever had. "He tried," Claire said quietly. "But some love grows in obligation, not choice." Lucas closed his eyes. All the years he thought he was unlovable, all the silences he blamed on himself, they were never his fault. They were inherited. The letter explained everything. His biological father had written letters, many of them, but they were never sent. Margaret had found them after his mother's death. A box hidden in the back of a closet. Dozens of envelopes. All addressed to Lucas. All unopened. "He never stopped loving you," Claire said. "He just didn't know how to reach you." Lucas's hands trembled. A life he never knew existed had been running parallel to his own. "I didn't bring you here to hurt you," Margaret said gently. "I brought you here because silence has a cost. And it has been paid long enough." 2 days later, they drove to a small coastal town. The cafe smelled of coffee and salt air. The man at the corner table stood when Lucas entered. He looked older than Lucas expected. But his eyes, they were the same. Recognition passed between them without words. "I've waited a long time," the man said. Lucas nodded. So had he. They spoke slowly, carefully, not as strangers, but not yet as family. They spoke of missed years, of wrong choices, of love that never stopped, even when it had no place to go. And when Lucas finally stood to leave, the man said, "I'm proud of you." The words landed deeper than he could have imagined. That night, back at the lake house, Lucas sat alone by the fire. He understood something now. Inheritance is not money. It is not property. It is not blood alone. Inheritance is silence. It is fear. It is love we are never taught how to give. And sometimes it is the courage to break what was handed to us. He was not broken. He had been shaped by quiet. And now he could choose differently. On his final morning, the rain returned. Soft, steady, familiar. Claire hugged him again. This time not with fear but with relief. Margaret squeezed his hand. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. As Lucas drove away, the road felt different. Not lighter, but clearer. The past had not changed, but its meaning had. And for the first time, silence no longer felt like home. Some stories don't end with happiness. They end with understanding. And sometimes that is the beginning of everything.